What I'm trying to do is create a composition with a central focus, with some idea sweeping down to the sides, variety. I want a variety of different textures and colours, reflections, try and give a sense of richness here. So I think what I'll start is grapes. Grapes are always a good starting point. They symbolise plenty, fertility and so on. Pineapple, central to the composition. We see pineapples as fairly commonplace now, but in the mid-19th century, pineapples were exotic, expensive fruit. Only the wealthy could afford pineapples, so including a pineapple is a status symbol here. This is a fairly wealthy still life. Quite a nice piece of china here. I quite like the fact that it reflects the idea of fruit here. What would be quite nice if we can light this so we can see the relief, so we can see the patterns of the fruit on the white china. To complement the china, glass decanter, carafe. Again, it's quite nice to have the reflections and the difference in texture between the glass and the porcelain. Put that central. Peaches. Peaches, for some reason, always seem to look better in pairs, so we put these together on the front. When Fenton took his still lifes in 1860, he was actually lucky that the weather wasn't very good. So for that year, a lot of fruit which you would normally not get available at the same time was all available together. So you get a combination of gooseberries, strawberries, grapes and so on, which was highly unusual. This is a typical wet plate camera of about 1860, sort of camera that Roger Fenton would have used. This particular camera is a folding bellows camera. Bellows were introduced in the 1850s. Prior to that, cameras were solid wooden boxes. And the purpose of the bellows was to change the distance between the lens and the plate holder in order to focus the image. For fine focusing, there's what's called a rack and pinion mechanism on the lens itself. You could turn the rack and pinion and the lens moves in and out. Because the subject didn't move, you could use a small aperture on your lens, which meant that the exposure time was relatively long, but the photograph was extremely sharp. You didn't have a problem with depth of field. So what was characteristic of work of Fenton, for example, is that you could pick up almost every single hair, every single piece of fur, feather, the texture on a grape or peach. So they were incredibly sharp. Of course, the image would have been upside down. So the photographer had to view the world in reverse. You can see here the ground glass or focusing screen, and this is where the photographer would compose the image, make sure it was sharp, it was in focus. In order to see it clearly, you needed what was called a focusing cloth. So the photographer would go behind the camera and then cover his head and shoulders with the cloth to exclude all the light so they could see clearly the image on the focusing screen. Now, Fenton, of course, wasn't the first photographer to make still lives. William Henry Fox Talbot, the inventor of photography, he took still life subjects in the mid-1840s. But what Fenton did was to take things to the next level. He combined an exquisite sense of aesthetic sensibility with his artistic training with incredible technical quality. So he produced images which were stunning in their composition, but also incredibly technically brilliant in terms of the capturing every nuance of texture and reflection and so on.